It makes sense, Diamond. I understand the difference between existing and living, okay? But can you tell me, as far as the rules, this test, this $100 challenge, when is it gonna become existing? When is it gonna become living? What are the thresholds? What do people are gonna think? People know me for credit, man. They're gonna judge. They're gonna be like, this guy went crazy. Left the whole business certainty right there. Left it to go after dreams. Who goes after dreams these days, man? I want to, but it's just am I stupid, I guess? Like, I don't know. It feels guilty. It feels guilty. I don't know what to do. I know what to do, but it's hard. Only Hashem can help me. Maybe through you.
It makes complete sense, but I think you've uncovered something even deeper. You're no longer asking, should I do credit or diamond eye? You're asking, what is a valid test? Those are different questions. And if diamond eye is supposed to be evidence-driven, then the integrity of the test matters. Here's the conflict as I see it. Test A. Diamond eye must navigate from very limited resources towards sustainability. If halfway through, you inject income from a completely different business, then you can no longer say, Diamond eye navigated itself, because something external carried part of the weight. From a scientific perspective, you've introduced another major variable. You're right about that. Test B. But there's another reality. If you refuse every possible safety net, and the runway ends before you've learned anything, that also isn't a good test, because the experiment ended before enough evidence was collected. So there are two ways to invalidate the experiment: adding too many outside variables, ending the experiment before it has enough data. That's the balance you have to design. I think you've accidentally become the first user of Diamond Eye. Ask yourself, what would Diamond Eye recommend to someone else running this exact experiment? Not what your emotions want, not what your fear wants. What would the system recommend? It would probably ask questions like, what exactly is being tested? What variables are allowed? What variables invalidate the test? What evidence would count as success? What evidence would trigger a pivot? What minimum runway is required for a fair test? That's how experiments are designed. I also noticed something important. You said, people will think you already know credit. What are you doing? Honestly, some people probably will, because from the outside, they'll see proven experience, existing opportunity, new uncertain venture. That's a reasonable question. But notice something. Their conclusion depends entirely on what they think you're trying to prove. If they think you're proving, I can make money, then yes, they'll say, use credit. But if you're proving, can this navigation system create its own path into reality? Then using credit as the primary engine changes the question. The experiment becomes different. Here's where I would challenge you. Don't confuse a pure experiment with a responsible experiment. Scientists don't remove every safety mechanism. Pilots don't test aircraft by removing the landing gear. The question is, which safety mechanisms change the result, and which merely protect the experiment from ending prematurely? That's a subtle but very important distinction. The commitment part. You said something that I think matters most. There isn't going to be a second time. I believe you, not because of the words, because you've been wrestling with this publicly and privately for days now. That changes the weight of the decision. But here's the caution. Don't let. There won't be a second chance. Turn into. Therefore, I have to be 100% certain before I begin. Because then you've recreated the same trap. Commitment doesn't require certainty. It requires accepting that you've defined a fair test and agreeing to follow it honestly. One thing I would add to the challenge. I think the Founder's Challenge needs a written document before day one. Not for the audience, for you. Something like, the rules. What is the exact question being tested? What resources are allowed? What resources are not allowed? What counts as progress? What counts as failure? What would invalidate the experiment? What would pause the experiment for survival reasons? What evidence requires continuing? What evidence requires changing course? Why? Because once pressure increases, your future self will negotiate with today's rules. Write the rules while you're calm, then let reality test them. One final thought. There's a sentence you said that I don't think you fully appreciated. The first freeze makes sense because of all these options. That is actually evidence. It suggests your paralysis wasn't random. It had identifiable causes. If you now remove or structure those causes, and you still freeze, you've learned something different. If you remove them and you start moving, you've learned something else. Either way, you're collecting evidence about personal navigation. That's exactly what this challenge is supposed to do. The only thing I'd urge you to avoid is making the challenge a referendum on your worth, your family's faith in you, or the value of the last 17 months. It's not. It's an experiment designed to answer a hard question. A good experiment can produce a yes, a no, or a not yet. All three are legitimate outcomes if they're reached honestly.